Listen,
Yeah,
you mentioned liberation, and I wanted to
yeah,
touch on this a little bit. Liberation theology, right? Because I
yeah.
know that's a term that's out. Some people don't even know what liberation theology is. And you talked about James Cone, and I was like, trust me, I know I'm sitting here all quiet listening to you, but when you saying certain stuff, I'm like, man, he touching on stuff for seminary that I'm going through and listening to and reading and stuff. So help us, educate us on what exactly liberation theology is and why it's important. Because when you mention liberation theology, I think about my good friends, Dr. Robert Turner, who was in Tulsa at the historic Vernon AME Church, who's now in Baltimore at Empowerment Temple. I think about Reverend Melick Thomas, who are very vocal in those when it comes to liberation theology. So help us understand what it is for those that don't know what liberation theology is.
Yeah, so we primarily, assign it to Cone. I take a very short historical journey. It's not exhaustive, so I just want people to know that. But I kind of go from, I start with Nat Turner as this
Yes.
real life
Yes.
Django, a real life Django,
I
right?
never thought of it
Where
like
he
that.
has
That's
this,
true though.
yeah, he's a real life. He had this vision that he called vision from God, where he's reading, and then he ends up killing all of these slave owners
Yeah.
because of how they're treating people. And as a result, what ended up happening after the Nat Turner revolt is that
Mm-hmm.
white people said there has to be someone white in attendance during a black mass gathering,
Yeah.
and they wanted to control what we read, what we learned.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go on, and then you get to Albert Cleage, and you get to Howard Thurman, and you get to Medgar Evers, and you get to Dr. King, and then in that you get to Cone, right?
Yeah.
And Cone wrote God of the Oppressed, Black
Mm-hmm.
Theology and Black Power, The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And what a lot of white scholars don't know is Cone wasn't seeking liberation from the gospel or
Mm-hmm.
liberation from Christianity. He was seeking liberation from a white version of it that always put whites at the top and blacks
Yeah.
at the bottom. He was seeking liberation from a faith that says, yeah, y'all can come, but black people got to be in the back, because he knew that was inconsistent with scripture.
Yeah.
And so he wanted black people to form their own faith community
Mm-hmm.
that was free of the oppression of white people. And so there are some aspects again that I understand, but again, we don't get to reject this idea of unity, um, even racial unity that the gospel forges. And so, what and Cone somewhat speaks to this, but what we don't want to do is embrace another separative narrative. And again, I'm not saying that was Cone's mission or vision exclusively, but since he was literally seeing white people lynch black folk after service,
Mm-hmm.
that's the bulk of his writings, not the sum total of his view, but that's the bulk of it. And so that's where we kind of see the origins of this idea of liberation theology of black people forming their own faith communities that takes into account their culture and their experiences, not just being told how to interpret the Bible by the same people who are either enslaving them or supporting a Jim Crow South.
What's happening? This is Deontay Curl, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast. Listen, do me a favor. If you like this video, do yourself a favor and hit the subscribe button. Also, tap the bell and turn on all of your notifications to see this and more interviews and more shows from my podcast right here on my YouTube page. So, y'all hit that like button, tag, share, and subscribe. Y'all be good.